Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a doomed soldier or a half-starved monk, or even a medieval leech enthusiast. No, tonight you're something arguably more humiliating. An assistant in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Not a star, not a hero, just some underfed extra in the background of a fake frontier, holding a lasso that no one trained you to use. You sleep next to a buffalo with indigestion, repaint cardboard saloons after every rainstorm, and occasionally dodge real arrows from Lakota performers reenacting the tragedies of their own people. It's not the West, it's the matinee version, and you're getting paid in leftover stew. Before we begin, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always enjoy hearing which corners of the world are drifting off to these softly absurd misadventures. And if you'd like early access to more of these historical bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake up face down in straw beside a buffalo with digestive issues. This is not a metaphor. This is just where you sleep now. The buffalo's name is Daisy, despite being very much a male and deeply committed to making your life worse. You shift slightly to avoid the latest puddle of something unspeakable, then blink into the pale light leaking through a tear in the tent canvas. Somewhere beyond the flaps, a bugle is being played by someone who has no business playing a bugle. Someone else is yelling about missing boots. A child is crying, possibly an adult, possibly you. You're not sure anymore. Your name doesn't matter. Not here. Out in the world, you used to be something. Or at least you thought you might become something. An actor, maybe. A writer. Someone with lines. Now, you're background extra number 14 in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and your most consistent role is man who holds the bucket. Sometimes you're a settler. Sometimes a bandit. Once you played a cactus. Not a man near a cactus, just the cactus. You stood completely still for 45 minutes while a cowboy pretended to shoot around you. The audience applauded. You did not bow. Your current title is unofficial, but everyone knows it. You are the handler of things that shouldn't need handling. Broken rifles, skittish horses, drunken performers with more ambition than balance. You've scraped stage paint off livestock, stitched fringe onto trousers that didn't fit anyone, and once had to remove a possum from the saloon set during intermission. You thought this job would be glamorous. You thought you'd ride across the plains, waving a hat and earning adoration. Instead, you ride in the supply wagon, crouched between a barrel of gunpowder and a box labelled "Bandit Mustaches, Emergency Only." The show smells like gunpowder, manure and regret, in no particular order. There's a constant haze of smoke in the air, half from the pyrotechnics, half from the cook's cigar, which he lights with burning cue cards. The saloon girls are always practicing their routines next to the horses. The horses are not fans. The sharpshooters practice on tin cans that still have food in them. Nobody checks. The food sometimes explodes. You once got hit with a flying bean. The memory still stings. It wasn't always like this. When you first arrived, full of dreams and at least 2 clean shirts, you were certain this was your moment. You'd watched Cody ride into town with his shining boots and windswept hair and thought, there goes a man with a future. I'll have one of those, please. You signed on with trembling hands and a suitcase full of hope. That suitcase now holds a single pair of socks, 3 crushed programs, and a dead moth you named Lester. Lester has seen things. You're mending a pair of leather chaps when the news comes. A man in a fringed coat, whose real job you've never actually confirmed, announces it like a town crier with a secret. We're going to Europe, he says, eyes shining with the sort of excitement that usually precedes logistical disaster. You pause, needle in hand, wondering if this is a joke or just another dream someone forgot to wake up from. Europe? You've never been to Europe. You've hardly been out of Kansas. Once you went to Missouri by accident and still haven't fully recovered. This is your big break, apparently. The greatest show on earth is about to go international. Queens, Kaisers, culture. You glance at the buffalo beside you. He grunts, shifts his weight, and farts explosively into the straw. You try to take it as a blessing. Packing began before sunrise, not because it was efficient or because the show ran like a well-oiled machine, but because someone had misplaced the tent stakes again, and the buffalo had eaten the map. You're not in charge of logistics, you're not in charge of anything really, but you are very good at standing near problems until someone else reluctantly deals with them. So you stand beside a heap of tangled rope, 3 crates, and a wooden wheel that doesn't belong to anything you can identify. The wagon master shouts something about timetables. A horse sneezes on your shirt. A Lakota man walks by eating a boiled egg with the quiet dignity of someone who knows this entire production will fall apart with or without him. You weren't told where exactly in Europe you'll be going. All of Europe, someone says confidently, as though that's a manageable concept. Paris, London, Berlin, places you've only seen printed on cigar tins. You nod and begin packing crates of costumes that have never been washed, still stiff with stage sweat and theatrical grime. One of the sharpshooters has left his boots in the food barrel again. You move them without comment. You're getting good at this. Cody wants every detail perfect, or at least perfect looking from the front row. He calls it exporting America. You call it shoving a painted horse into a freight crate and hoping for the best. William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill, is not here yet. He'll arrive last, dramatically, draped in buckskins and ego, just as the final trunk is closed and someone has started crying. Cody doesn't pack. Cody dreams. He is the living symbol of the frontier, if you believe the posters. He is myth in motion, legend on horseback, America in human form. He is also slightly behind on payroll and owes you a blanket from last winter, but that's neither here nor there. You've watched him ride into a muddy arena with his hair blowing like a shampoo commercial from a better funded time. He doesn't wave. He salutes. He makes eye contact with babies and widows. People weep. Then he dismounts and quietly asks if anyone has seen his lucky hat. You usually have. You've stopped returning it. He just takes it again next week. Today someone hands you a saddle and tells you to polish it for Queen Victoria. You blink. There are at least 9 saddles within reach, and none of them appear particularly queen-worthy. You choose the one with the fewest suspicious stains, and begin scrubbing with a rag that used to be your handkerchief. It's not clear whether the Queen will ever sit on it, or if she'll even look at it, but the saddle must gleam. It must shine like the illusion of civility this whole show barely holds together with canvas and spit. You think about writing "For Her Majesty" on the side in chalk, just to keep it safe. Instead, you draw a tiny crown under the stirrup and hope no one notices. Nearby, 2 handlers are trying to coax a buffalo into a travel crate. The buffalo is not interested. This is not surprising. The buffalo is also, in its defence, nearly extinct. There are only a few hundred left in the world, and your show travels with 20 of them, as if to say, here lies the American frontier, and we are just reckless enough to bring it to you, alive and drooling. The buffalo are stubborn, flatulent, and vaguely noble in the way overgrown furniture sometimes is. You once watched one of them break through a fence, eat an entire bag of powder meant for fake smoke, and lie down in a field for 3 days. When Cody found out, he called it symbolic. You're not sure of what. The show also travels with people, specifically Lakota performers, many of whom survived the very battles they now reenact on stage for the benefit of ticket-buying families who want excitement but not discomfort. There's something deeply wrong about it, but the entire enterprise is built on a paradox no one seems interested in solving. Sitting Bull himself joined for a season, not because he needed the money, although he was offered it, but because he understood the power of performance. He stood on stage and watched people cheer for him. He smiled. Then he walked off and refused to speak to Cody for the rest of the day. You admire him for that. He only had to endure 1 season. You've endured 5. Your role in these reenactments is blurry at best. Sometimes you're a cavalryman. Sometimes you're a background settler. Once you were an ambiguous frontier figure, which meant standing very still, with a fake rifle and trying not to sneeze. The Lakota men act out battles where their relatives were slaughtered. The crowd cheers. Someone throws popcorn. One of the older men wipes red paint off his face, with the same cloth he uses to clean his boots. You say nothing. He says even less. Today you help stack crates labelled war bonnets and saloon doors. You find a rubber tomahawk beneath a pile of props and pocket it, just in case. Someone has misplaced the tent that covers the main stage, so a group of extras begin sewing canvas together with shoelaces. A woman practicing her entrance on horseback rides through the wrong doorway and startles a sleeping fiddler. The fiddler screams. The horse bolts. Nobody falls off. Everyone claps. Cody will probably keep it in the show. Finally, hours late and perfectly timed, Cody arrives. His coat is too clean, his boots too polished, and his horse seems better fed than most of the crew. He announces that the tour will show Europe the soul of the West. Someone claps, someone else coughs. You sneeze into your sleeve and keep packing. Cody talks about honour, about freedom, about destiny and spectacle, and the importance of stagecraft in shaping national memory. You are holding a box of fake dynamite marked Fragile. It seems appropriate. As the wagons roll out toward the harbour, you glance back at the fairgrounds. The mud is still there. The smell of grease paint and manure lingers in the air like a half-finished argument. You realise, with a small sense of dread, that you will miss it. Not the glamour, then, there isn't any, but the chaos. The strange, stupid magic of being part of something so clearly broken that it feels real. You tighten the strap on a crate that's beginning to fall apart and try not to think about what sailing to Europe with 20 half-trained horses and a cannon might involve. At the docks, the steamer ship towers over the water like an iron hotel that forgot to make reservations. The loading process is slow, clumsy, and populated entirely by men who have never seen a live elk before. You have. You're holding one by a rope. It does not want to board. Neither do you, honestly. But Cody is already waving to invisible fans, and someone has begun playing a patriotic song on a trumpet that only hits 3 notes. You climb aboard. Just before the gangplank is pulled away, there's a splash. One of the cows, not a buffalo, not a performer, just a regular, unfortunate cow, has jumped overboard. Maybe she slipped, maybe she made a choice. Either way, she's now paddling in circles near the hull, mooing with the forlorn energy of someone who regrets everything, but refuses to say so aloud. The ship crew stares. The passengers stare. Cody stares. No one moves to help. The cow eventually swims back to shore and stands on the dock, dripping and triumphant. You salute her quietly. Then the horn sounds. The ship lurches forward. America begins to shrink behind you, becoming just another backdrop in a show that never quite knew where the stage ended and the myth began. You don't know what lies ahead, but you do know one thing. There will be buffalo, and none of them will behave. London doesn't so much greet you as envelop you. The fog is not decorative, like on stage. It is aggressive, wet, and inexplicably greasy. The air smells of coal smoke, damp wool, and whatever passed for plumbing decisions in the 18th century. You step off the ship and onto the docks with a splitting headache and a buffalo hair splinter embedded in your collar. The dock workers pause to stare as a costumed cowboy trips over a crate marked "Extra Tomahawks, Do Not Shake." A woman in a bonnet whispers to her companion while pointing at the Lakota performers, disembarking just behind you. You are already tired, already behind schedule, and already unsure how anyone thought this was going to work. But Buffalo Bill is beaming. He waves at the harbour like it's a hometown crowd. His coat is pressed, his boots gleam, and his horse, flown in special at absurd expense, appears to have been brushed by angels. Cody's moustache alone could run for office. He smells faintly of tobacco, gun oil, and ambition. The man is built for moments like this. You are not. You're handed a bundle of tent poles and immediately drop one on your foot. No one helps. A boy selling newspapers points at you and laughs. You tip your hat and mutter something patriotic. By midday, the public relations machine is already in full swing. Posters go up across the city in frantic waves, bold red letters proclaiming the American West alive and unleashed. Flyers are scattered like autumn leaves. Painted illustrations of stampedes, duels, and noble savages plaster every available wall. Cody poses for photographs in front of a stuffed buffalo that isn't from the West and isn't particularly stuffed well. You overhear someone describe the show as a violent ballet with hats. Cody nods as if it were a compliment. You're not part of the glamorous rollout. You're back at the encampment, repainting the fake teepees for the 5th time in 3 weeks. This time the paint is supposed to be weather resistant, which in practice means it immediately begins to run the moment British mist touches it. You try blotting it. You try fanning it dry with your hat. A gust of wind knocks the whole thing sideways, and the entire structure lurches like a drunk learning to curtsy. Nobody notices. Someone nearby is trying to teach a horse to bow for the Queen. It is not going well. Londoners begin arriving in waves, curious and confused. They marvel at the painted horses, the elaborate costumes, the simulated gunfire, the Lakota warriors lounging in wool blankets while sipping tea. Some attempt conversation, most simply stare. You are asked at least 4 times whether your gun is real, whether your horse is tame, and whether all Americans sleep in tents. You answer no to all of them, then yes, then give up entirely and start pointing at the concession stand. You've learned that the English will forgive anything if you do it with a straight face and a passing resemblance to confidence. Annie Oakley is an instant success. The Brits can't get enough of her. She's elegant, soft-spoken, and can shoot a coin off a fence post while correcting someone's posture. You watch her hit a row of clay targets mid-air without blinking. She then reloads and repeats the entire routine with her back turned, using a mirror. The crowd swoons. You once saw her shoot the head off a rose perched on a rider's helmet. The rider never even flinched. You flinched. You weren't even involved. Annie treats every performance like a minor inconvenience. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, it's with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where her bullet will land, and how long it'll take before you realise she meant it. Cody, meanwhile, is floating somewhere between circus ringmaster and international ambassador. He gives interviews, shakes hands, rides through the city like a conqueror with stage makeup. You once find him practicing a dramatic bow in a mirror while muttering, "For the crown, for the people, for the West." You back away slowly and pretend not to have seen it. He insists the Queen will come. He says this with the same certainty you reserve for rainfall and sudden diarrhea, and then she does. Queen Victoria arrives in full imperial solemnity, a retinue of silent men in velvet coats, a glistening carriage, and a facial expression carved from centuries of emotional restraint. The arena has never been so quiet. Flags wave, horses are brushed to within an inch of their lives. Buffalo are kept at a safe distance, although one still manages to moo at an unfortunate moment. You are stationed near the gate, wearing your best buckskin jacket and the least wrinkled pair of trousers in the prop bin. You are praying to no god in particular that nothing explodes. The performance begins with a cannon blast, 2 trick riders, and a lasso demonstration that goes mildly sideways but is salvaged with applause and a generous interpretation of on purpose. Annie performs her routine flawlessly. Cody gives his speech about frontier valor, manifest destiny, and the courage of pioneers. No one corrects his version of history. The audience nods in approval, mostly because they can't hear half of it over the gunfire. Then come the reenactments, battle scenes, cavalry charges, Lakota warriors in full regalia, performing choreographed versions of their own history, now sanitized, rearranged, and punctuated with crowd-friendly drama. Sitting Bull himself rides into the arena to thunderous applause. He raises a hand, nods once, and retreats. That is all. The applause grows louder. No one quite knows why. Somewhere behind you, a British officer murmurs, astonishingly realistic, while staring at a papier-mâché cactus that's slowly collapsing in the wind. Afterward, the Queen meets the performers. She remains seated. They do not. Annie curtsies. Cody bows like a man auditioning for a statue. Sitting Bull stands tall and expressionless. He offers a polite smile. Small, quiet, unreadable. The Queen does not return it. They exchange a few words through an interpreter. No one records what was said. No one would understand it if they did. The moment passes like a ship in fog. Heavy, slow, and entirely without witnesses. And then it's over. Cody is euphoric. He claims the Queen's applause was an endorsement of the American spirit. Someone suggests it might have been politeness. Cody ignores this. He gives a speech to the crew about cultural diplomacy, transatlantic brotherhood, and the sacred duty of spectacle. The show stays for months before Cody declared London a triumph, which was true in the same way a taxidermy lion is technically still a lion. For 5 long months, the show thundered across Earl's Court, firing blanks and waving flags for packed crowds who couldn't get enough of buckskin, buffalo, and Annie Oakley's eyebrow raises. There were cheers, royal nods, editorial gushings, and at least one knighthood rumour no one could confirm. The newspapers called it a cultural exchange. You called it a miracle that no one was trampled during the Queen's Jubilee. Eventually, the fog began to feel normal, the applause routine, and the canvas set started to sag under the weight of repeated triumph. So Cody, ever the visionary, pointed the wagons toward France, where the wine was better, the critics sharper, and the appetite for American drama somehow even more enthusiastic. You packed up the papier-mâché saloon, folded the collapsing teepees, and helped wedge a buffalo crate into a train car that was never meant for buffalo or crates. The wheels groaned. The cast sighed. The journey continued. Paris begins, as most things in this show do, with mud and misplaced confidence. The wagons roll into a field that was supposedly cleared for the performance, but looks more like the aftermath of an agricultural dispute. It rained the night before. It's still raining. The ground squelches with every step, swallowing boots and occasionally small props. Someone loses a tin drum in the first 5 minutes. No one tries to retrieve it. A child cries. You're not sure whose child it is, or if it belongs to the show. At this point, neither outcome would surprise you. The crew sets up in what can only be described as enthusiastic disarray. Half the tents are pitched sideways. The stage is slightly off level, creating a subtle slope that will later cause 3 rifles, 2 extras, and 1 unlucky dog to slide off mid-scene. The interpreter hired for the tour is a wiry Frenchman named Laurent, who insists on translating everything, including the word howdy, which he delivers with the seriousness of a man announcing a royal decree. You're fairly certain he has no idea what the show's about. You don't blame him, and yet the French adore it. From the first crack of the whip to the final stage death rattle, they are enthralled. Parisian crowds arrive dressed to the nines, coats, canes, delicate gloves, only to sit on damp benches and watch simulated frontier violence with expressions of rapturous delight. They sip wine, nibble biscuits, and occasionally applaud a bit too early. One woman faints during a buffalo charge. Another throws flowers at Annie Oakley, who catches them mid-stride and doesn't break eye contact. Annie speaks no French, but her stare is fluent in all languages. The show's centrepiece, of course, is the battle reenactment, a theatrical retelling of a real massacre, cleaned up for stage lights and curtain calls. The Lakota performers ride in full regalia, hollering and circling wagons, while stage settlers scream with convincing terror. You recognise most of the settlers as bored teenagers who couldn't remember their lines last week. The flames are made of dyed silk and a rotating fan. The screams are real, though mostly from the horses, who hate the noise and the smoke and the part where they're asked to fall convincingly. You assist backstage, which means you're the person who has to hose down the props after each scene and tell nervous volunteers that the gunpowder is mostly harmless. Today, your primary task is helping a horse out of a costume designed to make it look like two horses. It's unclear why this was necessary. The effect is unsettling at best. Two horse heads, one on each end, with the middle draped in canvas and confusion. The horse is sweating. You are sweating. You untie the straps and mutter an apology. The horse does not forgive you. From your spot behind the curtain, you watch the crowd during the climax. Cody rides in, waving a rifle, and saves the settlers with all the dramatic timing of a Shakespearean hero shot from a cannon. The audience erupts. One man in the front row begins to cry. Another clutches his companion's hand and mutters something reverent. You've seen this scene 16 times. You know the smoke is fake, the arrows are blunted, and one of the settlers is visibly wearing a wristwatch. None of it matters. The illusion holds. The applause is thunderous. Later that evening, you help wipe down the props with rags that haven't been cleaned since London. A group of French dignitaries tours the camp, nodding appreciatively at the teepees, the rifles, the performers in costume. One of them asks you where you learned to lasso. You tell him the truth, that you haven't. He laughs, assuming it's a joke, and offers you a cigar. You accept it, mostly because it's the first gesture of genuine warmth you've encountered in days. The cigar turns out to be awful. You smoke it anyway. Cody is in rare form. He hosts a reception for local elites and press, dressed in his best fringed coat, with his hair combed into submission and his boots shining like stage lights. He tells stories, half true, half invented, about bears, blizzards, and bravery. No one asks for sources. He explains the symbolic nature of the show, the educational value of exposing Europe to the spirit of the American West. Behind him, a Lakota dancer adjusts his headdress and drinks brandy from a teacup. He does not appear moved by the symbolism. You spend part of the evening scraping dried red paint off a drum that exploded too early during the last performance. Your hands are stained, your knees are sore. You hear someone nearby practicing lines for a new scene about the noble settler's dream, which involves a monologue delivered beside a wagon wheel and a suspiciously modern-looking lantern. You stare at the lantern for a long moment before turning away. Some things are best left unlit. The next day, the newspapers are filled with reviews. Most are glowing. A few are confused. One calls the show a savage opera of extraordinary authenticity. Another describes it as a thunderous marriage of chaos and culture. You're not sure what either of those mean. Laurent reads the reviews aloud while eating bread directly from a prop saddlebag. He mispronounces half the names and adds commentary where none is needed. Annie walks past, rolls her eyes, and mutters something unprintable. You make a mental note to steal her phrase for later use. Your own opinion of the show has not improved. The chaos backstage is still relentless. The mud has gotten deeper. The rifles misfire more than they function. One of the buffalo sneezed on a visiting duke. The duke said nothing, wiped his monocle, and applauded anyway. None of it makes sense, but all of it seems to work. The show, for all its absurdity, has become a mirror in which Europeans see a version of America they find palatable, dusty, dramatic, and just far enough away. At the end of the week, a well-dressed French critic visits the performers. He shakes hands, takes notes, and makes polite noises. He watches a brief rehearsal with narrowed eyes, then nods once and announces in perfect English that the entire production is sublime. Cody nearly bursts with pride. You, on the other hand, are crouched beside a wheelbarrow, trying to remove fake blood from your boot, using a rolled-up copy of the Le Petit Journal. You scrub in silence while the critic writes something in a notebook and disappears into the fog. You don't remember the last time you slept properly. You've stopped asking whether any of this is normal. The show moves on. It always does. The horses are loaded. The props are packed. The fake town is folded down and tied with ropes. You look out across the empty field, now cratered with footprints and hoof marks, and wonder how long it will take before the Parisians forget any of this happened. Probably not long, but that doesn't matter. They clapped. You would think, after Paris, that things might settle, that the gears of the machine would finally click into place, that the next stop, Germany, might benefit from lessons learned, props labelled, buffalo bathed, schedules confirmed. You would be wrong. Because if there's one truth you've learned hauling teepees across the continent, it's this. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show never gets more organised, it just gets louder. Rehearsals for the German tour begin in a muddy field outside Hamburg. There is no stage yet, there is no plan yet. There is, however, your bunkmate attempting to lasso a stagehand. Not as part of the show, just for practice. He's been trying to learn authentic cowboy skills in the off hours, which in practice means swinging rope in tight quarters and yelling "Yee-haw" with increasing desperation. Today he misses the stagehand entirely, snags a lantern pole and brings down half a tent. You're issued your costume for the tour. Trousers 2 sizes too large, a shirt that smells like old soup, and a hat so wide it catches the wind like a sail. You attempt to swap it for something more dignified. You are laughed at and handed a tin badge that reads Deputy Temporary. You pin it on upside down out of spite. Your rifle is missing. So is your bunk. So is one of the buffalo, last seen heading toward a cabbage cart. The teamsters chase it, shouting in 4 languages. It ignores all of them equally. Rehearsals are chaos, they always are. But this time there's a new twist. Every scene is being retooled to suit local sensibilities. No one defines what that means, but the end result is more gunfire, less dialogue, and a curious new dance routine that appears halfway through the cavalry charge. You ask why. The director shrugs and says it tested well with Belgian audiences. You're not in Belgium. You nod anyway and go back to holding a cue card that says danger this way. Sitting Bull has returned to the tour, though he's less visible than he was in Paris. He spends most of his time on the sidelines, wrapped in a blanket and sipping tea that you're fairly certain is mostly brandy. He's asked for more dignity in the staging, fewer fake deaths, fewer choreographed surrenders. Cody agrees in public and forgets in private. The script changes are minor, cosmetic, a few lines added, a few less theatrical cries, but the basic structure remains. The noble savage enters, the settlers are threatened, Cody rides in and saves the day. The crowd cheers, history is rewritten again. Annie Oakley, meanwhile, is unimpressed. She's seen it all before. You find her backstage one afternoon, practicing by shooting cigarettes out of people's mouths. Not props, people. A stagehand volunteers. She tells him to hold very still. He does. She fires. The cigarette explodes in a puff of ash and fear. He doesn't flinch. You do. She turns to you and asks if you'd like a turn. You decline politely, but with conviction. Annie shrugs and reloads. She is the only person in the show whose accuracy increases with her irritation. One afternoon, a cannon goes missing. Not a small prop cannon, a full-sized iron-rimmed artillery piece that was supposed to be part of the finale. You don't know how someone misplaces a cannon. No one does. The director insists it was misfiled. You check under the tarps, behind the dressing tents, near the costume bins. Nothing. Eventually, someone finds it 2 miles away, parked neatly beside a bakery. The baker claims he thought it was municipal art. No one corrects him. Your job changes hourly. In the morning, you're polishing boots for the chorus of faux settlers. By noon, you're helping reload rifles and teaching a French performer how to ride a horse without crying. By evening, you're fixing a wooden wheel with a fork and a prayer. At one point, you're asked to write new lines for a German nobleman playing a sheriff. His English is limited. You give him 3 sentences and tell him to say them with authority. He delivers them with all the menace of a wet sponge. The audience loves him. Meals are worse than usual. The cook has taken to boiling everything: meat, bread, possibly napkins, until it all has the texture of old felt. You try not to complain. Last time someone complained, the soup was mysteriously spicier the next day. You suspect vengeance. One night, someone spikes the stew with schnapps. The Lakota dancers don't drink it. The stagehands do. That night's rehearsal ends with a fistfight in the prop stable and a flaming wagon. The flames are extinguished. The memory remains. The buffalo are restless. They don't like the train rides. They don't like the food. They don't like each other. One of them has taken to charging fences for fun. Another keeps trying to sit down during the battle scenes. Cody refers to it as improvisation. You call it deep animal despair. The German press is fascinated. They refer to the buffalo as a symbol of natural fury. You are mostly trying not to get stepped on. Cody is busy giving speeches. He's taken to calling himself a cultural ambassador, which seems optimistic given how many of the props are made of papier-mâché and horse glue. He talks about bridging continents, uniting hearts, spreading the legacy of the American West to every corner of civilization. You find a cowboy hat floating in a puddle behind the mess tent and wonder if that was part of the legacy. Cody doesn't notice. He's too busy posing with a visiting duchess beside a replica saloon that leans slightly to the left. Every so often, a critic visits rehearsal. They take notes, murmur appreciatively, and ask questions like, "Is the shooting real?" Or, "Is that the real Sitting Bull?" Or, "Why is the settler bleeding?" The answers vary depending on who's talking. You once heard a teamster say the entire show was based on dreams he had while unconscious from heat stroke. The critic nodded and called it modern. You now use the same story. The script changes again. Now the finale involves a cavalry rescue, a marriage proposal, and something described only as a musical interlude with guns. You're not involved in that part. You're helping secure the grandstand so it doesn't collapse under the weight of too much enthusiasm. You hammer a loose plank back into place with a rifle butt. It works mostly. Someone nearby asks if you've seen the accordion player. You have not. You didn't know there was an accordion player. No one seems sure if he's in the show. The evening before opening, the cast rehearses the entire production twice. Once for blocking, once for sound cues, once more for lighting, which now involves gas lamps and a man with a mirror. Yes, that's 3 times. No one corrects the math. The cannon is fired early. A horse gets loose. A dancer sprains her ankle, tripping over a historically inaccurate cactus. You run lines with a performer who doesn't speak English and improvise the rest. When the director asks how it went, you say, seamless. He nods and lights a cigar off a torch labelled emergency use only. That night, you find a hay cart that hasn't yet been claimed by livestock. Lie down in the straw and discover you're sharing it with an accordion player no one can identify. He's Italian, doesn't speak much English, and may or may not be part of the crew. You ask what he's doing here. He just shrugs, pulls the accordion onto his lap, and begins to play something slow and mournful, like a funeral march that got lost on the way to a wedding. You don't ask again. You're too tired. You roll onto your side, pull your hat down over your eyes, and let the music carry you into something that isn't quite sleep but will have to do. Morning comes slowly in Germany. like a hungover guest who's overstayed their welcome. You wake in the hay cart with straw in your ears and the accordion player still asleep beside you, draped in his own instrument like a well-dressed barn ghost. You leave him there, quietly, and walk stiffly toward the rehearsal tents, where the usual chaos has reached an even more theatrical pitch. Today, you've been told, is a special day. A very important guest is coming. No one says his name at first, as if speaking it aloud might summon paperwork. Eventually, someone confirms the rumours. Kaiser Wilhelm II himself is attending the show. The Emperor of Germany, the supreme warlord. The man with the moustache that looks like it won a fencing duel. He is coming. Today. To see your show. Your show, which, yesterday, ended with a cannon firing half an hour early and a horse falling into the orchestra pit. You nod when told, then you go find a bucket and begin polishing spurs like your life depends on it. Because in a way, it does. Cody is already in full statesman mode. He's rehearsing his speech in front of a cracked mirror propped against a wagon. You catch bits of it as you pass. Honour of nations, friendship across oceans, unifying the spirit of mankind through pageantry and rifle drills. It's unclear whether he's quoting someone or just free associating through the scent of his own cologne. His hair is freshly oiled. His fringe has been brushed. He asks for his ceremonial coat. You hand it to him without a word. He doesn't thank you. You didn't expect him to. Annie Oakley, for her part, is unbothered. She's sitting on a crate, carving her initials into a bullet with the quiet concentration of someone who has done this before. She's been told, rumour has it, that the Kaiser may request a personal demonstration. Specifically, he wants her to shoot the ash off his cigar. This might be a joke, it might not. Annie doesn't blink. She just nods, loads her rifle, and asks you to bring her a fresh apple. You do so immediately and without question. The set has been rearranged for the Emperor's viewing pleasure. The seating area now includes extra cushions, royal insignia, and 3 suspiciously shiny chairs that may have been borrowed from a hotel dining room. The performance route has been shortened slightly to ensure the Kaiser doesn't have to look left or right too often. Press photographers arrive early to stage promotional shots. You're asked to rake the mud into something more dramatic. You do your best. You end up with trenches that look like they've been hit by romantic artillery. The photographers seem pleased. Cody spends the afternoon posing beside Sitting Bull, who barely tolerates it. The 2 men shake hands for the cameras. The moment lasts 10 seconds. It is printed in newspapers across 3 countries. You're standing just outside the frame, holding a prop rifle and a thermos labelled tea, probably. You do not make it into the photo. You never do. Then the Kaiser arrives. His entourage is immense. Officers, aides, interpreters, a man whose entire job seems to be carrying an ornate chair. The Emperor himself steps from his carriage, like a man accustomed to red carpets, applause, and absolute certainty. His moustache is magnificent. His uniform is pristine. He gazes around the encampment with the faint amusement of someone browsing a particularly violent museum exhibit. Cody greets him with a bow that toes the line between patriotism and spinal injury. The Kaiser nods. You are told not to speak unless spoken to. You hold your breath, just in case. The performance begins with fanfare and just enough smoke to raise alarms. Horses gallop. Rifles crack. Settlers scream. The usual, but everything is a little sharper today, a little more rehearsed, a little more terrifying. Annie's shot goes off clean, whether at an apple, a coin, or a cigar ash. No one knows for sure. The crowd erupts. Cody rides out like a myth made of fringe and bravado, saluting dramatically and delivering a speech that may or may not be the same one he rehearsed. The Kaiser claps politely. His aides clap exactly 2 seconds later, as if following protocol. Backstage, it's less composed. A Lakota dancer is missing a moccasin. A settler extra has torn his trousers during the wagon ambush scene. The cannon fires half a second early, again. You stuff powder back into the barrel and whisper apologies to no one. At some point, someone drops a tray of bayonets. They clatter like wind chimes, made by angry blacksmiths. A visiting journalist writes down, "Impressively immersive." After the final bow, the Kaiser requests a tour. Cody obliges, practically glowing. You trail behind, holding his coat, and listening as he describes the authenticity of the buffalo, the bravery of the performers, and the educational value of theatricalized gunplay. The Kaiser nods, occasionally interrupting to ask questions like, "Is that a real teepee? And why does that child have a mustache?" You try not to answer. You're not paid enough to lie at that level of sophistication. There is a brief awkward pause near the saloon set. A cow wanders into frame. The Kaiser smiles faintly. Cody announces, unprompted, that the animal represents the heart of the West. The cow snorts, relieves itself and walks away. The Emperor says nothing. You envy the cow. Later, at the press reception, Cody gives another speech. This one is longer, more grandiose, and full of words like destiny, fraternity, and heritage. The Kaiser says he is inspired. He signs the guest book with a flourish and poses for several staged portraits. As the guests begin to depart, Cody walks with a nobleman and discusses the possibility of future tours. Russia, Spain, perhaps Egypt. You sit on a stump, exhausted, trying to figure out how mud got into your boot despite never removing it. A woman in feathers walks past, sighs, and mutters something that sounds vaguely like, "Again?" You agree, even if you don't know what she meant. The sun sets late, as it always does here. The last carriage rattles off. The photographers pack up their lights. Someone begins taking down the flags. You're handed a broom and told to clear the main path of leftover programs, cigar butts, and a mysterious assortment of gloves. You sweep in silence, watching the shadows stretch across the trampled field. Just beyond the tents, you spot one of the Lakota dancers crouched beside a fire. He's eating stew out of a bowler hat. Not because it's funny, or theatrical, or symbolic, just because it's the only clean thing he had. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. You stand there for a moment, broom in hand, boots soaked, watching the steam rise from the hat as the last echoes of gunfire and applause fade into the evening. You return to America with the posture of someone who's been awake too long on a moving train. The sea crossing was rough. The buffalo hated it. You hated it more. One of them managed to get loose on the deck midway through, knocking over barrels and leaving hoof-shaped memories in the wood. Annie Oakley threw up once silently, then resumed target practice using a bucket as her spittoon. Cody spent most of the voyage telling anyone who would listen, mostly himself, that the European tour had been historic. You don't argue. You just nod, mop the salt spray off your boots, and prepare to unload 17 crates of props that were never supposed to get wet. Back on home soil, the show is booming. The posters are bigger, the crowds rowdier, the rifles louder, and the errors harder to cover with paint and stage fog. The American audiences, freshly impressed by overseas praise, turn out in droves. They want to see what Europe saw. They want to clap for Cody. They want Sitting Bull, Buffalo, Broncos, Bandits, Annie, action, drama, spectacle. They want the West, delivered neatly in 90 minutes, and available twice daily with refreshments. But they don't want the bills, and unfortunately, those are growing faster than the ticket sales. The show is expensive. The animals eat constantly. The performers want paychecks. The wagons break down every other town. One of the steam-powered effects machines exploded during a matinee in Ohio and took out half the saloon set. The paper printed it as part of the act. It wasn't. A man in the front row now swears he saw his life flash before his eyes, and also saw Cody in it. He tells this story to anyone who'll listen. Cody doesn't correct him. He signs autographs afterward and sells the man a souvenir badge. There are new cities on the tour now. Bigger cities, stranger cities. In Philadelphia, a horse gets into the lobby of the hotel and rides the elevator. It stops on the wrong floor. You are sent to retrieve it. You find it standing calmly beside a potted plant and a bellhop who has aged visibly since the last time you saw him. The horse refuses to leave until offered an apple and a promise never to be asked to do that again. You agree. The horse does not forgive you. In Chicago, the entire troop is nearly arrested when a city official discovers that blank-firing pistols still count as discharging firearms under local law. Cody gives a speech about patriotism. Annie shoots the cap off a bottle. The charges are dropped. You have no idea why. You don't ask. You've learned that questions are like spark showers, briefly illuminating, often dangerous, and best avoided if you're standing near anything flammable. The show adds new scenes to keep things fresh. A riverboat robbery, a fake gold rush, a comedic number involving a raccoon and a drunken sheriff that you suspect was written entirely by accident. The props arrive late, the scripts don't. You end up improvising 3 lines as man who shouts from porch and get a standing ovation. You consider making it your new profession. Then someone hands you a mop and you remember who you are. Meanwhile, Cody runs for office. It's not a surprise, he's always had the voice of a politician. Loud, firm, vague. He campaigns as a man of the frontier, a man of vision, of action, of deeply impractical hats. He gives speeches between shows, often from horseback, once from atop a wagon full of pyrotechnics. He says things like, a new dawn for the West and the values that built a nation. You listen while cleaning out the buffalo pens and think about how many of those values are currently stuck to your boots. He loses. The first time narrowly, the second time definitively. The crowd still adore him. He can't walk through a town square without being recognised. Children wave, women swoon, men slap his back like they knew him in the war, even if they didn't. But when it comes time to vote, they remember that applause is free and ballots are not. Cody shrugs it off with grace and a bottle of something labelled hair tonic that smells like regret. He says he's needed more on the stage than in the Senate. You nod. You keep sweeping. You are beginning to forget what not sweeping feels like. Backstage, spirits are flagging. The glamour of Europe has worn off. The shine of American fame feels thinner than it used to. Costumes go unmended. Tempers run short. Someone punches a mirror. Someone else kisses the wrong cowboy. You sleep in a pile of rope, labelled maybe props, and dream of quieter places where no one reenacts gunfights before breakfast. The Lakota performers are quieter too. They do their scenes with professional detachment, then sit in silence, smoking or sketching symbols into the dirt with sticks. One of them used to laugh during rehearsals. You haven't heard that laugh in weeks. You sit near them sometimes, not speaking. They don't mind. Or if they do, they don't say. Annie holds it together better than most. She still practices daily, still hits every mark, still glares daggers at anyone who forgets their cue. But even she looks tired. Less like a legend, and more like a woman trying to keep her boots dry in a world determined to soak them. You offer her a biscuit one morning. She accepts it without a word. You count that as a personal victory. Cody calls a meeting near the end of the season. Not a formal one, just a gathering near the fire with the lead performers, the managers, a few extras, and you, because you're holding the logbook and no one told you to leave. He talks about the mission, the dream, the legacy. He says the West isn't just a place, it's an idea. He says the world still needs that idea. And then he says the words you were hoping not to hear again for a long time. It's time, he says, to go global again. There's a pause, some nod, some groan. You say nothing. You're holding a sparkler. You don't remember who gave it to you or why, or when it was lit. You watch it fizzle down to your fingertips. You let it drop into the dirt. It hisses once and dies. You should have known Cody meant it. When he said global again, you hoped it was a metaphor, a pep talk, the kind of thing you say to keep the troop from quitting en masse. But no, 2 months later, you're back on a boat, surrounded by crates. The buffalo are seasick again. You're seasick again. Cody stands at the prow of the ship, like he's discovering the continent for the second time. You're curled beside a barrel, questioning every decision that led you here. The show has been rebranded again. It's not just Buffalo Bill's Wild West show anymore. Now it's Buffalo Bill's colossal American historical exposition of the frontier experience. The posters are redder, the fonts are larger, the moustaches are more prominent. Cody insists it's not just a show now, it's a cultural offering, an ambassadorial mission, a rolling museum of American identity, complete with explosions. You ask if this means the script is getting shorter. He says no. You go back to inventorying tomahawks. Europe welcomes you back with cautious enthusiasm. The critics remember the charm, the spectacle, the novelty. The aristocrats remember Annie. The public remembers the buffalo. But this time, something's changed. The requests are different. Nobles in velvet coats and monocles ask for authenticity. They want real savagery. They want more action, more blood, more of the stuff they imagine the West is made of, without ever having to smell it. The show adapts accordingly. The battle scenes grow louder. The gunpowder is doubled. The screams are rehearsed to sound more desperate. New actors are hired to play dying settlers, wailing dramatically in the dust. One of them practices too hard, sprains a rib, and insists on performing anyway. He's applauded for his commitment. You are asked to smear fake blood on the wagon spokes for atmosphere. You use a mop. No one notices. In one performance, Sitting Bull dies at the end of the massacre scene. This wasn't in the script. It just happened. He staggered dramatically, fell to his knees, then bowed. The audience roared. They cheered louder than they had for the rescue. So now it's part of the show. Every night, he dies. Every night, he bows. Every night, they clap harder. You once overheard a woman say, with tears in her eyes, "Such grace, even in defeat." You nearly walked into a tent pole. The performers are silent about the change. The Lakota dancers add the death cue to their routine without comment. Their faces remain unreadable. You once asked one of them what he thought of the new ending. He looked at you for a long time and said, "It's just paint." You didn't ask again. Backstage, the accidents mount. The cavalry scenes involve more horses now, more galloping, more flanking maneuvers, more coordination that never quite materializes. In one rehearsal, a rider slips on a loose tarp and dislocates his shoulder. In another, a wagon overturns and crushes a crate of plastic bayonets. You are sent to retrieve the scattered weapons. You find one lodged in a bass drum. You leave it there. It feels right. Annie Oakley still hits every shot. She's unfazed by the growing chaos. She's added new tricks, shooting from horseback, ricocheting bullets off mirrors, balancing a glass on the tip of her rifle while lecturing an Italian baron about powder loads. You once saw her fire 2 guns at once while chewing licorice. She remains the only person in the show who does not sweat. You've started measuring time by Annie's size, once an hour, exactly, always during someone else's mistake. The new props arrive late and often mislabeled. One day you open a crate expecting paper flowers for a finale sequence and find 3 taxidermied prairie dogs wearing tiny bonnets. No one claims responsibility. You try to return them. They stay. Eventually, one of them becomes part of the background saloon set. A visiting critic writes that it symbolizes the domestication of the frontier. You nod gravely and say yes, of course it does. Another time, someone adds a stuffed dog to the edge of the battlefield scene. You don't know why, it's not in the script. Someone thought it would add emotional weight. During the final gunfire sequence, the dog falls over. A child in the front row screams. You're sent to clean it up after the show. The red paint didn't come off. You end up scrubbing it with whiskey. It doesn't help. The dog remains tragic. Cody is loving it. Every new city is a chance to speak about destiny. He gives interviews, stands beside flags, hands out brochures. He says things like, "The myth of the West lives in all of us." And this is not just entertainment, it's memory made visible. You watch him say this while adjusting a holster on a man wearing pink leggings and a raccoon hat. You say nothing. It's all memory now. The logistical failures continue. In Vienna, someone confuses the feed schedule, and the buffalo are accidentally fasted for a full day. They perform anyway, angrier than usual, knocking over 2 barrels and a small cannon. In Madrid, the stage lights catch fire during a dramatic monologue. A stagehand extinguishes them with a jug labelled "Do not use" on flames. In Brussels, someone forgets to tie down the saloon facade, and it collapses mid-scene, narrowly missing a duke. The duke laughs. You do not. Your job, as always, shifts by the hour. One morning you're taping a broken spur. By noon, you're being yelled at in Hungarian about an accordion that doesn't exist. By evening, you're sweeping fake entrails into a bag. You've stopped asking questions. The show demands motion, not understanding. Then one afternoon, you're handed a new hat. Not just any hat, a slightly better hat, one with a feather and fewer bite marks. You're handed a badge with Cowboy number 8 scratched into the back. You used to be number 14. You ask if this means you've been promoted. The stage manager shrugs and says they needed someone taller to ride second from the left. You are not taller. You are just standing straighter than usual. You nod, take the badge, and try not to let it feel like anything. You look out across the arena as the crowd begins to file in. The drums are pounding. The smoke is curling. The air smells like powder, leather, and cooked onions. The cannon is primed. Annie is already adjusting her cuffs. Somewhere backstage, someone yells that a horse is missing. You hope it's not yours. You pin the badge to your chest. It falls off. You pin it again. It's going to be another long night. One day, you're crouched behind the saloon set, holding a rubber snake in one hand and a dented lantern in the other, when Annie Oakley walks by and gives you a look usually reserved for misbehaving dogs and defective ammunition. She stops, folds her arms and says, in the same voice she once used to threaten a German baron, "If you're going to handle stage props that look like weapons, you'd better remember 3 things. 1, always point them away from the horses. 2, never point them at me. 3, that's not a weapon. That's a snake." You nod solemnly. You're not sure what the snake is for, but you've been told to carry it, and you don't question orders anymore. Annie sighs, checks the sights on her pistol, and walks away. She's got a show in 15 minutes, 2 fresh targets waiting on barrels, and a tendency to hit what she's aiming for, whether it's official or not. You stay out of her way, everyone does. It's the first rule of the show that no one wrote down. Annie remains a miracle of calm in a production that's rapidly unraveling. Her hands are steady, her timing perfect, her eyes sharper than ever. She still practices every day, quietly, methodically, while the rest of the troupe panics over broken wagons and last-minute script changes. But she's tired. Not in the dramatic, sighing sense, but in the way someone gets when they've been too good at their job for too long. You see it in the way she rubs her temples after a show, the way she looks at newcomers with distant disbelief, the way her compliments come in fractions now. Not bad, or almost. Good shot for you. Cody, by contrast, is beginning to come apart at the seams. It starts small. He forgets someone's name during a curtain call. Then he calls the show by the wrong title, twice. At a press dinner, he refers to Sitting Bull as Chief Ironcloud, a performer who left the show 3 years ago after punching a stagehand and stealing a horse. When corrected, Cody waves it off and says he's been thinking a lot about legacy. That's the word he uses now, legacy. It appears in nearly every sentence, along with honour, posterity, and the sacred burden of memory. He drinks more, he talks more. Sometimes you think he doesn't even know he's still on tour. You overhear things backstage. You're not trying to. You're just in the wrong place at the right time, as usual. Investors visit more often now. Their suits are newer than the rest of you. Their boots are clean. They speak in quiet tones about debt, venues, cost overrun, reduced ticket revenue. You hear phrases like temporary insolvency and restructuring opportunity. One man refers to the Buffalo as an expensive liability in fur. You nearly spit out your stew. You weren't aware stew could be spit out. It's more of a paste. Cody doesn't seem to hear them, or he hears them and pretends not to. Either way, he keeps selling the show like it's still fresh, like the crowds are still packed, like the West is still waiting to be discovered. He gives speeches about American values while forgetting to tie his boots. He misplaces scripts, forgets cues, and once wrote out 3 scenes early during a duel reenactment. The actors pivoted mid-performance and called it a dream sequence. The audience clapped. Nobody asked questions. The Buffalo looked tired too, visibly thinner, slower. One of them now refuses to charge unless bribed with an apple and a pat on the flank. Another tries to eat a leather vest between scenes. You wrestle it out of his mouth and find tooth marks in the fringe. The costume manager blames you. You blame the Buffalo. The Buffalo sneezes and ruins both of your shirts. There is no winning. The sets are worn thin. The teepees sag. The painted backdrops are faded from rain and rolled storage. The props are chipped, the canvas tents patched with fabric from old flags. And the saloon sign now reads Salon after half the lettering peeled off during a thunderstorm. No one replaces it. You suggest turning it into a new character. You are ignored. One afternoon, while you're helping repaint the fake desert rocks for the ambush scene, Cody walks by mid-monologue, talking to no one in particular. He's wearing mismatched boots, holding a script upside down and muttering about statues, how many he thinks they'll build, where they'll place them, what angle his bust should face. You nod along until he disappears behind a curtain. The man painting beside you mutters, "He's rehearsing for history now." You can't tell if it's a joke or not. Rehearsals grow sloppier, timings slip, stage cues are missed. A backdrop collapses mid-scene and reveals a half-dressed cowboy smoking behind it. The crowd cheers. They think it's part of the act. In another show, the wrong cannon goes off during a lull in dialogue, startling the horses and sending 3 actors fleeing into the wings. A critic calls it innovative pacing. You add it to the brochure. You try to keep up. You still show up early? You still polish the props, mop the paint, scrape the blood, or paint meant to resemble blood, off the wagons. You fix what you can. You ignore what you can't. You've learned that being reliable backstage means being invisible. People only talk to you when something's on fire, which is, regrettably, often. Annie notices more than she says. After one particularly disastrous rehearsal, she hands you a new pair of gloves and says, "You'll need these tomorrow." It's going to get worse. You thank her. She doesn't smile. She never does. But she waits for you to try them on. You do. They fit. She nods once and walks away. You wonder how long she'll stay. You wonder how long you will. Cody announces a new finale, a patriotic tableau with flags, music, smoke, and a monologue about the promise of the frontier fulfilled in pageantry. You're given a flag to wave. You wave it. It bursts into flame during the first run-through. You stomp it out with the new gloves. They hold up well. You nod appreciatively. By now you've developed an ear for applause. There are kinds. The warm laugh of recognition when Cody rides in late and noble. The sharp burst for Annie's impossible shots. The polite, rhythmic clapping when a flag is waved or a horse does something vaguely majestic. And then there's the kind you heard tonight. Piercing, disorganised, and distinctly tinged with panic. You pause mid-scene change, squint past the footlights, and realise the audience isn't clapping at all. They're screaming. It's not for the finale, It's for the buffalo mascot which has just escaped. You're not sure how it got loose. One moment, it was tied up backstage, grazing calmly on a pile of rejected costume fringe. The next, it's charging across the arena floor with the kind of aimless authority you can only get from something wearing a papier-mâché buffalo head and a performer named Frank inside. Frank's legs are visible. So is the zipper. A small child points and yells, "The monster is broken!" Frank roars, possibly on purpose, and barrels straight into the saloon set, collapsing 2 walls and an unlucky lantern stand. Sparks fly. Nobody moves. The orchestra, comprised of 2 violinists and a man with an alarming drum habit, tries to recover by launching into a jaunty tune. It doesn't help. The dying settler on stage gets up, confused, and waves to his wife in the crowd. Someone claps, unsure. Cody, ever the professional, rides in 10 seconds early and salutes with wild intensity. The buffalo mascot crashes through the backdrop and vanishes behind the curtain. Silence follows. For once, no one says it was part of the show. The chaos lingers long after the curtain falls. One of the extras, furious about the missed cues, yells at a reenactor who responds by reciting all his lines backward in defiance. A child from the front row wanders backstage and punches a cavalryman in the knee. The man breaks character with a yelp and is reprimanded for breaking the illusion. He glares at the child. The child smiles sweetly and steals a feather from his headdress. Backstage romance isn't helping morale. One of the dancers has recently broken up with one of the cowboys, and in an act of theatrical vengeance, someone lashes the cowboy to a prop wagon during scene change. He doesn't struggle. He just lays there, staring at the ceiling as the scene plays out around him. You untie him after the curtain drops, and he says thanks, like he just got back from a war. You pat him on the shoulder and offer him part of your biscuit. He declines, claiming to have lost the will to chew. The Lakota performers are visibly done. They've been quiet for weeks, but tonight something shifts. They go through their roles with the same deliberate precision, but add something new. A pause here, a longer silence there, a moment of stillness where movement is expected. They don't announce anything. They don't need to. It's clear they're done being part of the fiction. You recognise it for what it is. The audience doesn't. They think it's a powerful new scene. One woman whispers, "Such dignity." A man calls it artful restraint. You bite your tongue hard enough to taste blood. After the show, you find one of the dancers sitting on an overturned drum, carving something into the wood with a nail. You sit near him, careful not to speak. Eventually, he holds up the carving. It's a buffalo, sketched in a few rough lines, with a crack running down the middle. You nod. He tosses the drumstick into the dirt and walks off without a word. The props are deteriorating again. The costumes don't match the scenes anymore. One performer enters in a fur-trimmed jacket, meant for the Arctic sequence, and ends up in the desert ambush scene. No one blinks. In a rehearsal, a settler yells, "Fire!" 2 beats too early, and triggers a domino effect that ends with a cannon misfire and a crate of flags ablaze. You're asked to put it out. You use the stew pot. It works, but you lose the night's dinner and half a spoon. Cody doesn't notice, or he pretends not to. He's too busy writing a new prologue, one with phrases like "vision of liberty," "living theatre of the people," and "a frontier not yet tamed by time." He reads it aloud to no one in particular while walking through the camp. You hear him from your tent and roll over to face the wall. The man 2 cots over mutters something about poetry and throws a boot. The horses are edgy. They feel the tension. So do you. You try to stay busy, polishing gear, rewinding ropes, redrawing the fading signs for the souvenir tent. A new batch of programs arrives with the cast listed alphabetically under Heroes of the American Saga. Your name is misspelled. Twice. You correct it with ink and a lack of conviction. That night's performance feels brittle. The timing's off. The cues are soft. Annie winged a bottle on her second try. Not enough to draw attention, but enough that she grimaces and reloads with visible irritation. The band plays a funeral dirge instead of the celebratory march. No one fixes it. No one wants to be the one who tries, and then, as if to summarise the state of things, the heroic settler trips. It's the climax, his big entrance meant to signal the turning of the tide, the hopeful swell of music, the march of progress. He runs out, flag in hand, speech memorised, and hits a loose plank. His foot catches, his arms pinwheel. He flies forward in a perfect arc and lands face first in the dirt. His hat rolls off. His flag snaps in two. He's fine, a little bruised, maybe winded. He sits up slowly, looks at the crowd, and raises a thumb. Nobody claps, not even out of pity. After the settler fell, and the applause never came, something in the air shifted. Subtly, but permanently. The show went on, of course, it always does. But now it feels less like a performance and more like a dress rehearsal no one bothered to cancel. The backdrop sags, the buffalo sulk. You find a stray bullet casing in your boot, and a piece of set dressing in your stew. You eat around it. There's no use complaining. No one has the energy to pretend things are fine anymore. So they don't. They just keep moving, slower than before. Cody, however, remains determined. He insists the show is more important than ever. He says the world needs stories, needs heroes, needs symbols to believe in. Which is why, one overcast afternoon, you find yourself standing beside him, under a makeshift canopy, holding a stack of cue cards for an interview with a European professor who looks like he hasn't smiled since the Crimean War. The professor introduces himself in 4 languages, none of which you speak fluently, and launches into a series of questions about historical fidelity. He is very serious about it. He has a notebook filled with questions, a pen that clicks like a metronome, and a voice like damp parchment. He begins by asking Cody what role primary sources play in the construction of his narrative. Cody blinks, says quite a big one, and smiles as if that explains everything. You raise the next cue card. Authenticity as entertainment. Cody reads it aloud like it's scripture. The professor writes something down. It doesn't look like agreement. For the next hour, the conversation staggers somewhere between philosophy and farce. Cody insists the reenactments are based on lived experience. The professor gently asks whose experience. Cody gestures broadly at the camp. The professor clarifies. Cody deflects. You try not to sigh too loudly. The professor asks about the timeline of the show. Cody proudly explains how the Indian Wars, the Gold Rush, the invention of the telegraph, and the Pony Express are all featured in one streamlined arc of symbolic storytelling. You realise, with a faint chill, that none of these events happened in the same decade, or in some cases the same half-century. You glance at the cue cards. One says the West in spirit, another just says VIBE. It occurs to you, not for the first time, that half the show now contradicts the other half. Last week, the cavalry rescued settlers from a Lakota ambush in a scene meant to represent 1876. Yesterday, Sitting Bull died heroically in a recreation of an 1881 skirmish that never happened. Tomorrow's schedule includes a bank robbery in Dodge City that supposedly took place in 1848, before the bank or the city existed. No one questions this. No one writes it down. If they do, they call it dramatic license and clap harder. Cody wraps up the interview by giving the professor a signed program and a piece of petrified wood he claims came from the original Oregon Trail. You saw him buy it from a gift shop 2 towns ago. The professor smiles faintly, shakes Cody's hand, and leaves without a word. You pack up the cue cards and hand Cody his coat. He doesn't notice that it's not his. Later that week, a museum curator visits the camp. She's compiling a collection of real frontier artifacts and asks if the show would be willing to donate a few pieces. Cody agrees instantly and promises genuine historical items. He gestures for you to handle it. You nod and disappear behind the wardrobe tent, where you gather the most plausible options available. A chipped coffee tin, a bent horseshoe with initials you can't read, and a leather boot with left painted on both sides in red ink. You polish it, you wrap it, you hand it over with the reverence of a monk presenting a relic. The curator beams. You feel vaguely complicit. Word spreads that the show is contributing to a national archive. Cody announces it at intermission. The audience claps. Someone yells, "History matters!" from the bleachers. You stare at your own boots and think about how thin the line is between history and decoration. You stepped over it years ago. You just never noticed until the trail behind you vanished. Backstage, you find a pamphlet someone's dropped. The Real West, as told by Buffalo Bill. The cover features a sunset that never existed, 2 men on horseback looking brave, and a mountain that looks suspiciously like the one painted on the backdrops. You flip through it. Page 4 claims Cody rode with Custer. Page 9 claims he once defeated a gang of outlaws, single-handedly. Page 12 is blank. Probably an accident. Probably not. You think about asking someone whether any of it's true. Then you remember who you'd be asking, and you let the question go. The show has become an Ouroboros of myth. Every night it reenacts a memory it never actually had. Every performer plays a role in a story shaped less by what happened and more by what people want to believe happened. There's a word for this, probably, but you're too tired to look it up. You just know that the dust on your coat isn't always from the road. Sometimes it's from something being swept under a rug you can no longer see. Even Annie, usually immune to reflection, seems quieter. She sits near the fire after a show, carving initials into the grip of a rifle she never uses. She doesn't speak. You don't interrupt. You suspect she knows more than she lets on, and less than she used to. That's true for most of the cast now. You all carry fragments of a West no one ever lived in. Just different pieces, held in mismatched hands. Cody's speeches have grown longer. He speaks of posterity, of preservation, of the great project of memory. He says truth with air quotes now, as if it's a concept best viewed from a safe distance. The new script includes a line where he calls the show a mirror of the past, polished for clarity. You almost laugh the first time you hear it. You don't. You just adjust the lighting so he gets the reflection he wants. You wake one morning to find someone's replaced your bunk tag with Cowboy Historian. It's meant as a joke. You leave it up anyway. A journalist asks to interview you after the next matinee. Not Cody, not Annie. You. You don't know why. He's writing a piece about the human face of the American epic. He wants to know what it's like to live the West every day. He asks if you've ever ridden for the Pony Express. You shake your head. He asks if you've ever fought in a duel. You shake your head again. Then he asks if you knew the real West. You pause. Not because you don't have an answer, but because you do. You nod. And you say nothing, because you're too tired to explain. The next season doesn't so much begin as drag itself into existence, like something wounded that still wants to be admired. The tents go up slower. The wheels creak louder. You patch your coat with fabric from an old curtain and no one notices the difference. The first few shows sell reasonably well, but then the crowds thin. The applause quiets. The dust hangs in the air longer after each performance, because there are fewer feet to kick it up. The backdrop is peeling. Not figuratively, literally. The canvas sky has split along a seam, revealing a strip of bare wood that no one has time to paint over. The mountains are faded to the colour of old socks. Someone suggests turning it into a symbol of erosion. You suggest they paint it. They don't. Attendance dips. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough. Enough that the snacks at intermission are cut. Enough that the posters go from colour to black and white. Enough that the souvenirs now include dented tin cups and misprinted programmes. You try to correct them with a pen. You give up halfway through the stack. You start selling them for half price and call it limited edition. Behind the curtain, everything is coming apart at the seams, some literally. The costumes are fraying. Fringe falls off in mid-performance, buttons pop, zippers stick. You once saw a settler trip over his own spats, fall face first into a wagon wheel, and crawl off stage still reciting his lines. He received modest applause. Someone mistook it for physical comedy. He didn't correct them. He just limped backstage and asked for an extra blanket. Cody tries to hold it together, but he's thinner, paler. The boots are polished but scuffed at the heels. His voice cracks when he says destiny. He stops riding out before every show and starts sending a boy with a flag instead. Sometimes he still gives speeches, but only when there's press nearby. He talks about expansion, about upcoming tours, about strategic re-evaluation. You hear him say, "We're recalibrating the operation," while you're using your sleeve to patch a hole in a teepee. Someone says Cody mortgaged everything to keep the show alive. His land, his name, even the rights to the programs. You don't know if it's true, but you start noticing changes. The horses look different, slightly smaller, slightly more confused. You think they're rentals. You think the feed's been cut with oats that smell suspiciously like sawdust. You think the buffalo know. The fights backstage get louder. They used to be about egos, who got top billing, who had the better costume, who got to kiss the barmaid during the saloon scene. Now they're about boots, about stolen socks, about who lost the only good saddle. Scripts go missing and reappear with pages torn out. Someone accuses someone else of hoarding gloves. You find a pair hidden in a feed bag and don't say anything. You've become an expert in triage. You sew, patch, clean, fetch, rig, unrig, hammer, twist, drag, polish, and occasionally improvise when someone forgets their entrance. You once replaced an entire saloon door with a broom held at an angle. The audience clapped. You bowed. It was the high point of your week. Then Annie leaves. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't throw a farewell party. One day she's there, and the next day she isn't. You hear she took another job. Something quieter, steadier, maybe exhibitions, maybe demonstrations, maybe just peace and quiet and a bed without fleas. The rumour is she wrote Cody a letter. The other rumour is she didn't. You never find out. The show's quieter without her. Not just in the literal sense, though it's true the gunshots seem hollower now, but in the way the air feels backstage. She was a kind of gravity, a steady point of reference. Without her, the production feels unmoored. The timing slips, the rhythm frays. The new sharpshooter misses twice in a row and blames the wind. The wind does not apologise. Cody doesn't mention her by name. He refers to transitions and new phases. He brings in two new acts, a man who juggles knives and a girl who sings ballads about places she's never been. They're both perfectly fine. They're also not Annie. The crowd knows it. So do you. You're promoted to assistant to the assistant stage manager, which means you now officially carry the blame when the props aren't in the right wagon. You write your new title on a piece of wood and tack it to the side of your tent. It falls off in the wind. You don't bother putting it back up. The printed programs get blurrier, the ink bleeds, half the names are spelled wrong. Some are missing entirely. You start handing them out with apologies. Eventually, you stop handing them out at all. You use the extras to stuff holes in your mattress. One day, a man asks for a program to remember the show. You give him a slightly less crumpled copy and say, "Good luck." He nods as if you've given him something sacred. The buffalo stop charging during the stampede scene. One of them simply stands in the middle of the arena, chewing slowly, while a settler sprints past yelling, "They're coming!" The buffalo does not come. The audience laughs. Someone calls it avant-garde. You write that down in case it needs to go on the next poster. There are fewer performances now. Sometimes only one a day, sometimes none. 1 week, you only set up the tents 3 times. You spend the rest of the time fixing things that don't want to be fixed. You repair a wagon axle with a spoon. You patch a saddlebag with a sock. You build a fire with posters from the last tour. No one misses them. And then finally Cody cancels a leg of the tour. Not all of it. Just the next city. Then the next. You know what's happening. Everyone does. But no one says it. The announcement is made in the same tone someone might use to reschedule a picnic. Breezy, apologetic, optimistic. You nod along. You're not surprised. When the news comes, you're fixing a fence. Not because it needs fixing, but because it's something to do. You're using your belt to hold the top rail in place, and your hands are too sore to tie the knots properly. You step back to admire your work, such as it is, and watch the wind bend the canvas banners overhead. The words are faded now. The edges are torn. One of them still says the greatest show of the century, but the ink has run and the letters smear like they're trying to escape. You let your belt drop, sit down in the dirt, and stretch your aching back. The show isn't over yet, but it's starting to look like it might be. You're tying a bootlace around a lantern pole when someone tells you there's a show that night. Just like that. No build-up, no announcement, no rehearsal. One last show, they say. The posters weren't printed, the programmes weren't updated. Half the crew thought they had the week off, but Cody says it's happening. Tonight, one final performance. You nod. You go back to tying the bootlace. It's the only thing holding the lantern up, and you figure that, at this point, symbolism deserves at least minimal structural support. No one says the word final too loudly. The tone around camp is casual, maybe even optimistic, like this is just one more routine performance, just another loops around the same dusty ring. But the quiet says otherwise. The horses are already saddled, the props are already packed too neatly. The kitchen hasn't started dinner. Someone's cleaned their boots. You've never seen that happen voluntarily. Cody's dressed early, and that alone is a warning sign. He usually waits until the last possible minute, then sweeps in, fringed and polished, like he woke up backstage. But today he's ready before noon. His coat's buttoned, his hair's brushed. He's got a speech in his breast pocket, folded carefully, probably rewritten 5 times. He says it's not an ending, just a pause, a pivot, a temporary retreat in the face of logistical challenges. You hear the words, you don't believe them, neither does anyone else. The arena is only half full when the drums start. Some of the regulars are there, familiar faces, curious onlookers, a few newcomers who bought tickets thinking they were in for a comedy. In a way, they're right. You can already tell how this is going to go. The main curtain has a rip down the middle. The saloon set is missing one swinging door. The flags are still damp from last week's rain and smell faintly of mildew and wet glue. The first scene starts off well enough. A cavalry charge, a cloud of smoke, the usual shouting, but then the left half of the painted mountain backdrop gives way, collapsing forward with a long, tired creak that sounds more like resignation than disaster. It crushes a pile of wooden crates meant to be settler luggage. One of the extras improvises and pretends it's part of a bandit ambush. Another screams, trips and yells, "My beans!" The audience laughs. You mark that down as a win. From that point forward, nothing goes according to plan. The stagecoach's wheel gets stuck in a rut that didn't exist yesterday. A horse refuses to gallop and instead trots sideways while maintaining eye contact with the audience. A fake shotgun misfires and sets off a plume of smoke that lingers too long and triggers a coughing fit in the front row. You're asked to cue the music. You look for the violinist. He's not there. You hum something tuneless under your breath and hope no one notices the silence. Cody rides out midway through the second act, ready to deliver his monologue, the one about legacy and grit and what the West means to those who never had a chance to see it in real time. He raises one hand. He pulls out his speech. He unfolds it slowly. The spotlight centers on him, and then his microphone fails. Not just a crackle, not just a glitch. Complete silence. He doesn't panic. He lifts his chin, projects like he's standing in a field, addressing a crowd of ghosts. You can't hear most of it, but you catch phrases. Dream that never died. Spine of the nation. Campfire of memory. Some in the crowd lean forward. Others smile politely. A child sneezes. You hear it clearly from 30 feet away. The rest of the performance unfolds in a kind of collective haze. No one's really hitting their marks anymore, but no one seems to care. The Lakota riders skip a cue, but show up 2 scenes later and circle the wagons anyway. A settler shoots wildly into the air, misses everything, and shrugs like it's a metaphor. You jump in to fill a gap in the cast, even though you weren't scheduled. You forget your lines halfway through and just tip your hat. The audience claps, out of pity, humour, habit. It doesn't matter. The last scene should have been a patriotic tableau. Flags raised, smoke rising, a final speech. Instead, someone forgets to cue the music. The platform with the banner gets stuck. The cannon doesn't fire. The moment stretches, awkward, silent, unscored. Cody steps forward, salutes the crowd, and then walks off without another word. It's strangely effective. You consider calling it artistic minimalism, or maybe just exhaustion in formal wear. You ride out one last time during the closing loop. Just a lazy lap around the arena, hat lifted, eyes scanning a crowd that looks content enough, but definitely ready to go home. You're not in costume. You forgot your sash. Your boots don't match. You wave anyway. A few people wave back. You mouth a line you don't remember clearly. Something about the great horizon, the promise of tomorrow, or maybe buffalo. No one hears you. No one needs to. After the bows, fewer than usual, you head backstage and start dismantling the set before anyone gives the order. You pull up tent stakes, you coil ropes, you wrap the leftover prop rifles in a tarp. Around you, the others move slowly, mechanically. There's no talk, just the clatter of wood, the shuffle of boots, the rustle of old canvas folding into itself like a memory with nowhere left to go. Cody walks through the middle of it all, still in full costume, holding his hat by the brim like it weighs more than usual. He doesn't give a speech. He doesn't say, "Good job," or "See you soon." He just nods at a passing horse and sits on a barrel. You've never seen him sit during tear down before. One of the buffalo escapes again. Not a dramatic stampede, just a quiet shuffle past an open gate. It wanders to the edge of the field, stands for a while, then lies down under a tree. No one follows it. No one calls it back. You figure it earned the break. You sweep the arena floor with a broken broom, dragging dust into small symbolic piles. You find a glove. You find a torn programme. You find a silver button you think might have belonged to Annie. You pocket it without thinking. The audience is gone now. The stands are empty. The air is still warm, but the sun is slipping. You hear someone laugh once, sharp, tired, genuine. You don't turn to see who it was. Someone lights a fire for the first time all week. Not a dramatic one. Just a small cook fire, nothing more. You sit near it and warm your hands. You're not sure if that was the last show. No one said it was, but no one said it wasn't. Years go by. The wagons are gone. The props have vanished. The costumes were sold for pennies or eaten by mice. Possibly both. Years have passed since the last shot rang out. And now it's just you and a buffalo who has settled into semi-retirement on a patch of borrowed land. He doesn't do much, neither do you. But you've both earned that. You used to wonder if the show might come back, if someone would round everyone up again, patch the teepees, rethread the lariats, paint fresh dirt onto a new backdrop. But it never did. Turns out that final performance, the one nobody told the buffalo about, really was the last one. You found out a year later, in a letter that arrived late, addressed to Cowboy, maybe. You read it beside a fence post, then used it to start a fire. Cody's name still shows up in newspapers now and then. Anniversary pieces, essays about spectacle. You heard he died in 1917, in a Denver suburb, surrounded by debt and the same kind of quiet affection people reserve for faded legends. They say he was still talking about expansion, still dreaming of a revival. They say the crowds never stopped loving him. The banks weren't so sentimental. You kept some things, at first, a glove missing its thumb, a spur with no match, a flyer with your name on it, Cowboy number 8, promoted and forgotten. But eventually, all that fell away too. Firewood, patch material, paper for notes you never mailed. You started to forget the lines, then the cues, then the faces. What you remember now is stranger. The way the dirt tasted after a fall. The way Annie's eyes squinted just before she shot. The buffalo that knew how to fake a limp for sympathy and snacks. Sometimes people ask what the real West was like. You lie. You give them the version they paid for. The one with clear heroes, perfect hats, and sunsets that waited until the music swelled. You tell it soft and slow, and with just enough swagger that they don't notice the gaps. Because maybe history isn't what happened. Maybe it's what gets a standing ovation. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. A life spent backstage, half in costume, half in confusion, chasing a version of America that never quite existed. If you'd like early access to more gently absurd wanders through history's cracked facades, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lamke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.